Your show's rubbish.
Hello, welcome. The Trout Spinners here. Gary Forrestal. I'm with Mars Purnell, my co-host, and it's a special episode this week. A very special episode, in fact, because we are interviewing Andrew Phillips, the head of XFM during the Ricky Gervais show. Best known for "We're not scared of Andrew Phillips." We don't know if he'll remember that, but we'll ask him. But I think it's fair to say we've interviewed Richard Anderson on the show before, and that was, I think that went well for our first ever interview. But we were quite nervous before. I think we're nervous again, aren't we? Not too bad, but a bit nervous. So, how are you feeling, Miles?
Yeah, I'm more nervous with this one. I don't know why, but I think it'll be good. We've got some listener questions which we want to ask Andrew alongside our own sort of inquiries. But I think it will offer more than anything, an insight into what it was like to work at XFM, and also
not just work at there, but run it, but manage the whole company, really.
And also, I've spoken to him before briefly, but obviously he did have a relationship with Ricky, Steve, and Karl. So kind of hoping to find out a little bit more about what it was like to work with them and their personalities, like behind the scenes, as well as their on air sort of personas.
He's a unique take on that kind of world of Ricky Gervais, because there aren't many people who've managed Ricky Gervais in his whole life, but he's one of them who has. I know Ricky didn't really take his management, probably he wasn't scared of Andrew Phillips it's a manager, but he did manage Ricky Gervais, and it'll be interesting to chat to him. So anyway, this is going to be that episode. We are currently about 10 minutes away before he joins our Skype call. We hope you enjoy it. Yeah, we'll record a little sign off as well. Just a little plug. Next week it's going to be a Dutch or Otherwise, which is sort of more our general podcast. Then we'll be back to the Ricky Gervais show and the Trout Spinners as they enter 2003. So that's kind of the plan for what's coming up. But yeah, just hope it goes well. And please leave your comments. Let us know.
Yeah.
Here he is with us, the man, the myth, the legend, Andrew Phillips. Andrew,
how's it going? You got the right guy.
Apparently, that's what I've heard.
I'm a man, a myth, and a legend. I've been called a lot of things in my life, but never that. That's fantastic.
Well, you have now. So thank you very much for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, I might, pull out any moment. So
you can. There's an emergency button on the screen.
Right. Well, if I don't like your question, usually what happens, it goes quiet. So if it goes quiet, I'd read that as like I'm not interested anymore.
And that was the Trout Spinners podcast with Andrew Phillips.
Yeah, see you later.
If you enjoyed that, email in.
So, Andrew, I'm just going to take you back, if I may, before we get into sort of broader questions about you and what you do and things like that. The reason the listeners know you, many listeners, many dedicated fans know you, is because of a particular show. So it's July 2003.
Ooh.
Karl Pilkington is playing in the office a piece of audio that Ricky and Steve have written, and is full of swearing and is very derogatory towards the radio authority, apparently. Yep. And you walk by, this is what Karl says, you walk by and say, it's not going out like that. Do you remember that incident?
No.
It's a long
I told you.
That's the silence. But no. Yeah, that causes a lot of tension.
I do remember a lot of swearing. And I do remember that, because I can swear because it's on a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you can swear on this, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so all right. So one of the characters in those three names you mentioned made a really interesting line once, which was that I like the word fuck. And I like to use the word fuck. I just don't want to be told when I can and can't use it. So I just want the freedom to be able to use it. Now, of course, that's fine if you're in a podcasting world, but if you're in a radio world, I've got a funny feeling that the word fuck might not go down very well.
No.
You know what I mean?
Even at XFM.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was one thing I used to like to do, and I always encouraged it if possible, because I actually think if you bleep out a swear word, it's actually more
funnier.
impactful. It's more funny. So I used to encourage all the presenters, if you're going to swear, that's fine, but just have your, a noisy button, a crazy button, like even like a fart or a zing or a bang, and it's funnier, right? But not those guys wanted to actually say the words and say lots of those words, and they were just pushing the buttons just for the fuck of it because they wanted to.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't like the word fuck, and I hardly ever use the word because I think it's fucking dreadful.
Well, that's only 27 times today, but yeah, it can be impactful. We've discussed this about swearing and the things like, because we write things and we always think, well, you don't want to put too much swearing in it because it's like it's just for the sake of it. But swearing can actually serve a purpose in sort of.
Yeah, I'm in another book of another person you might have heard of, and basically I had to fire him on the radio, and effectively he actually says the reference in the book, he says about myself, he goes, now I like to use the F word, he said, but never in my life have I heard so many Fs in one phone call. And yeah, so I mean, you got to use the word in the right time.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's not.
If you use it too often, it loses its meaning.
Exactly right. And F is one of those words. It's an amazing word. I mean, I could say it in so many ways, like, fuck you. And that means, and so now
you can say that. You can say that, Andrew, whenever you want.
Exactly. And then I can say fuck you and fuck you. And that's got even more of a meaning to it. And it's funny, right?
Yeah.
And fuck your show.
Fuck your podcast, guys.
We'll clip that and use it every week because that's the best compliment we've ever had.
We don't have any jingles, so
no, that's our jingle. We just set that.
But no, Ricky did say that though, because when he talks about that feature, he said we could bleep out the vowel, so it's the vowel that's offensive.
But in fact,
yes.
Yeah, because I think they used a lot of C words. Now, would a line be crossed on a like maybe not in your life in general, but as a program controller, would the C word, even bleeped out, be a line sort of too far for you?
Well, it depends how far you're bleeping out. I mean, like if you can hear the beginning of the word, I'd think you've already kind of like said the word.
Yeah, I think they're
yeah, the secret. I mean, because they they took a length out. What's that word about when you say take a little bit and make a long out of it.
Out of a molehill.
That's it, something like that.
Yeah.
Fucking, I can't remember that stuff. But the thing is, it's that they did with the swearing and that kind of concept. If you think about it, because they're pushing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And XFM,
they actually wanted to get response, so they wanted to get in trouble, and they wanted my ass to get kicked. So effectively, that's why they would push it.
Yeah, we're going to ask some other questions first, but I'm just going to come to this now.
Can I just? Yeah. You've read the contract I sent in regard
the non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah, the non-disclosure, the NDA.
NDA.
Basically, it says I have a limit, which is 3 questions. After that, I just don't know what to say anymore.
You just okay. That's
None
fine.
of them are interesting, Andrew. So try
well,
your best.
Okay, see what you think of this question then. Okay. Was Ricky Gervais the most challenging person that you've managed? And if not, who was?
Okay. First answer, no, not at all. Absolutely charming man. Cheekiness about him. I'll tell you a story about him, which kind of sums him up for me. I was having a meeting with him actually. He'd come into the office to have a catch up, and we decided to make a coffee. And so we went to the kitchen area in the old Capitol Radio building, which is halfway in the middle of the building. It's like, and the way the kitchens are designed, you're trapped as you go in them. You've got to go in to make your coffee, and then you probably die in there while making it and then come out. So we went to make the coffee, put the kettle on, and a very famous singer turned up and walked by at the same time to make a coffee. You might know him. He's the lead singer of Elbow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I know of him.
I don't know his name. But,
Guy.
Sorry.
Guy's his first name. Anyway, and they both looked at each other, and they were both awestruck. It was beautiful to watch. You just looked at it, and I thought, like, well, is somebody going to say something here or what? And literally, what happened was, I remember the situation was, Ricky was like, Elbow, I love your music. I love your music. It's fantastic. And then you got Guy going, Ricky. I love you. I love you.
The Office.
So
Yeah.
they basically just had this like love fest for a moment. I went on and made a coffee and left them to it. But I think that sums him up. I think like he's not always looking to be funny. I think he's just looking to be human, and reactions to life is what he does really, really well. And out of that comes the gold. But he's a really good bloke, I think. Really good bloke.
I
Yeah.
think that's the same with like every kind of like media personality, isn't it? They're only ever showing, you know, what you see on TV or in an interview, but you're never going to get to see that sort of behind the scenes. You know, social media does give you a little bit of an insight, but I would love to have been, you know, you to seen him like when he wasn't on stage, as it were, you know.
Yeah, you just saw him making a cup of coffee, as you say. That's just a
No, he
normal
didn't make it. He would never make his own coffee.
Oh, right, okay.
But the point, I want. There was another part to that question was, have I worked with anybody else who's worse? The answer is yes. Can I tell you who that is? The
You
answer
definitely
is
can.
no. No, I can't. No, I can't.
No, you cannot change the contract just before we
No.
came on air. You're allowed.
It's not
No,
going
it's
to happen.
fine. That's absolutely fine, Andrew. But
I once bumped into Ricky on Oxford Street too one day. He was actually walking up Oxford Street and I was walking down Oxford Street, bumped into each other, and hi, and that was it.
Do you still talk to him now, like on the phone? Or visit him?
not nowhere like that used to be. I mean, how do you? I just
what about Steve? Do you talk to Steve much, or Karl?
Okay, Steve. I met my best meeting with Steve when he was working for us was in the Underground. I literally got on the Underground. I think it was at Piccadilly. I think I got on at Piccadilly, and he literally was standing there. Well, standing up because he has to. He couldn't, find a seat big enough. But he was standing, holding onto the rails. I think someone was holding onto him. I can't confirm that or deny that, but something was happening there. And I saw him, and I said hi, and he said hi, and we had a bit of a chat. How you going? Very friendly guy. We kind of like whenever we had conversations in those early days, they were pretty cool. They were fine, because we were all just starting then. None of us, had egos. I mean, like Karl, I could do anything with Karl in those days. But now, he, if I meet up with Karl, it's like, it's such an ego now. It's out of control.
Really? Is that serious?
No, it's massive. It's massive. He goes now. What happens is when you meet him for a coffee, the ego comes in first, and then he comes in after.
The entourage.
Alter ego, and he goes, "I'm sick of it. See you later."
Yeah.
Andrew, can I ask you what does a program controller actually do? We're both fans of radio, and I listen to radio a lot. I just want to know what your job was and like what you did and.
Well, the program controller, which are now called content directors because it's all changed, but program controllers, the jobs in say like let's go back a few years in radio, they were pretty powerful jobs, and you had a lot of responsibility. Basically, because you lived and died by ratings, which is, every 3 months you get to know whether or not your shows, your audiences are working. You have a tremendous amount of responsibility, and you have to do all of the contracts for the talent, the formats, oversee that you're adhering to a promise of performance, whatever. I'm old enough to remember what it was like to work with the radio authority, and now of course it's Ofcom.
Yeah.
But they set a precedent of what you're allowed to do, and that's down to as much as how much music you're allowed to play, how much speech, and you just have to keep on top of all the laws and the regulations, and particularly if people want to keep swearing on your radio station, it's a nightmare.
But you didn't have to like listen to all of the shows or anything. There was obviously like some QA assessment that went on, obviously at different stages.
Okay, there's two. I mean, if you work for the public broadcasting, e.g., say the BBC, you've got about 7,000 people working on one show.
Yeah.
So you've got the producers. So they've got so many people working. There's layers, and the reason why they've got those layers is because it's harder to get to the person who's responsible. If you go to commercial radio, there's just one fucker in charge, and if it all goes wrong, he gets killed.
Yeah.
And
so much pressure.
That's the old-fashioned program. Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of pressure because if you're doing a 24/7, 7-day-a-week radio station with, say, like most of it being live radio, you're under pressure all the time.
Wow.
And if you're recording your output all the time as you have to, if you get one complaint, you have to be able to find that exact piece of audio and answer to it and explain what.
God. And all the press that goes along with that, like having to make statements and, cover your back.
Well, it depends on who you're working for. See, so for example, if you're working for a reasonable network or a group, then again, you will have a press team that you'll go to, and you'll have to go through lawyers even on what you are saying or not saying. Because
was XFM a reasonable employer? Did you like working there specifically as a program controller?
Loved it.
Oh,
Loved
that's
it.
nice to hear.
Yeah, but one of the best times of my life. When I die, on my stone, my epitaph, I want fucking useless at everything, but had a great time at XFM.
My epitaph would just be the first bit of that, and then
Yeah.
So.
But are you crying now?
Yeah, well, it was meant to. But,
no, I loved XFM.
You loved it.
Just to give you the context of why I loved it was a challenge. It was ahead of its time. If you think about all of the names that have been on that station and are now household names, when you think about that, we took a hell of a lot of a risk. I mean, I remember when I hired Zane Lowe, somebody in authority said to me, why the fuck do you want to hire a Kiwi?
Really?
That Kiwi now runs Apple Music, and
pretty exactly.
much.
What did that person have against Kiwis particularly? Is it because you're Australian and the conflict there, or is it?
No, it wasn't. No, nothing to do with that. It was just like I think he couldn't believe that you could find talent in the UK.
Yeah,
he was brilliant. I remember listening to him on I can't remember what music station it was, but if you think of like the wealth of talent that originated at XFM, I think I'm totally with you, because I often, when I talk to friends, I go, you've got to listen to this show because it's so ahead of its time. And it was even,
look, even for example, Dermot O'Leary. I remember Dermot O'Leary. He did. He filled in for John Kennedy.
Did he really?
Wow.
Kennedy, right? And
he's like the only one there now, isn't he? Like Kennedy.
And I think they've made some changes recently to his show.
Oh wow.
But John Kennedy's like, well, back to the elbow story. I remember one day I was driving home from some gig and I heard Newborn by Elborn, which is I'll be the corpse in your bathtub, which is a pretty interesting opening line for a song. But it's very beautiful with the piano melody. And I was gripped by this song. And I rang John. I said, John, who is that? He said, oh, it's Elbow. I said, put that on my desk. Oh. And so the next morning at work, I playlisted it.
Wow.
I think that was the beauty of John Kennedy in the fact that he would play all this sort of music. He was like the John Peel.
Oh, I loved. Did you ever work with? Because obviously there was like Adam and Joe, Simon Amstell.
Yeah, look, I did it. Okay, how's this, right? So the other day I was invited to speak at a digital conference, and I think one of the subjects I was asked about was podcasting. So I thought to myself, you know what? Who the heck could I speak to? About? And obviously the obvious names come up, but they all told me to fuck off. They were too busy. So what I did was I thought to myself, why don't I call Adam Buxton? So what I did was I had to track him down first. So I sort of thought I had the old email address, give it a try. It did work. And I said, do you remember me? He said, of course I remember you. I said, I need a little chat. Can I have a chat? And he goes, absolutely. What would you like to do? And I said, I just need a few questions on why podcasts work. How do you think they work? What would you do? How would you do it? What you would suggest? Generally some really interesting stuff. And he goes, not a problem. I'll tell you what. He said, let's do it on Monday. I went, fine. And he gave me a time. I called him. So I called him. And if you listen to the Adam Buxton show, it's very much, he begins his show with his walk with his dog, right? In his manor, his farm he's got. He walks with the dog and he talks about the week that was and what's going to happen. And so he said, I'll do an intro with you while I'm doing that. So I'll record one for you.
Oh, wow.
So he literally recorded. And the first thing I said to him, hey, thanks very much for your time. He said, no, thank you. I said, he goes, well, you do realize that if you hadn't asked me and Joe to fill in for Ricky Gervais, we wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah. No, I bet.
You've started so many careers, like Adam.
Ruined a few too, but yeah.
Must feel great to
look. You know what? I'm extremely honoured, and but I was very courageous, and I say that humbly. I was courageous in the fact that I would say that not everything has to be right the first day you start it. And, like if you let things go, you just don't know. There's a helicopter going over me. I think it could be Ricky Gervais popping around. But Yeah, it doesn't have to be right day one, and
No.
it doesn't have to be right day two. But if you give it time, people start to believe that there's a real narrative going on, and that there's a lot of honesty and openness, and that's the key to comedy. That's the key to music passion. You can't orchestrate and plan things too well. You have to let things find themselves. And if I look at XFM, it was like when I first came in, I took over from Bob Geldof.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did. And I could tell you an interesting Bob Geldof story, but I won't.
Leave
But
that for another-
the thing is that I took over from it, and it was struggling to find its soul and audience because it had focused so much on a narrow playlist of what was kind of Britpop at that time. And it was Oasis, Blur, Oasis, Blur, Oasis. And that's all
You're
it
in
was.
good company. Gary loves Oasis.
Yeah, I know. Well, who doesn't? And I can tell you some stories about them, but I won't. The thing is that
Teasing us.
the thing is that I said to myself, how are you going to grow XFM? If it's all about new, then, why can't we burst that bubble and get out there and try comedy? Why can't we try, dance music? In fact, Eddie Temple Morris, who's now a great jock on Virgin, started the remix show with him where dance meets rock. Now, everybody thought that was crazy, but he's been doing that now for pretty much 20 years. And many DJs broke their music through that show. But if you try to explain that, so I'm going to do this show that's called Where Dance Meets Rock, everyone will tell you to fuck off.
Yeah.
But actually, it worked.
When you hired people like that, or Adam and Joe, was there any sort of formal interview process, or did you just sit and chat with them and get a vibe like this is going to work, I think, with these two, and just hire them like that? Or was it a kind of formally like, have an interview, do a trial show, or did you just work on instinct?
Well, very good questions. In fact, the best question of the podcast so far up to now.
We wrote them together.
Boring. Yeah, but that's a really
wrote
good
them
question.
together.
Yeah. Did you wrote the question together?
No, we did not write that. That's not written. It just came out.
Well, how do you unpack that? You see, I don't think life's as simple as that or this way. I don't think life's as simple as that. It depends on the person. So without giving away too many names, all are different. I've met some of those people I work with in sort of a interesting environment where there's lots of things happening
to do. Lots of things to do.
Yeah, lots of things to do. That's right. Thank you very much for helping me out there. And in that environment, you'd go, do you know what? This guy's good, or this lady's brilliant. That's talent, Yeah. They're able to say things instinctively, which are really clever. The challenge is, can they do that in a microphone? So if you're looking at somebody and you can react, that's one part. But can you do it when nobody's looking at you, like just with the microphone? So it's about learning whether or not those people have that ability. Now, here's another thing about teams on radio that's interesting about talent. It's all chemistry, right? And chemistry is what you're looking for. Now, you can't put people together and say, have chemistry. It doesn't work like that.
So have a bit of crack.
Exactly. Break the ice here, smoke this. But it's, no, really, it's about seeing if there is a synergy, if there is a natural form, and then if not, it's not going to work. You see, there are some people in the names that we've talked about. They're really good at leading. So in other words, give them the mic, they're fine. They'll just keep going. They can feed on stories and music, and they're fine. There are other people, really talented people, who cannot do that. They have to be fed. They need someone to say to them something, react to it. Exactly right. So there's not one case or one way you do it with everybody. You find it.
Yeah.
You have to do that patiently.
How would you define that dynamic then between Ricky, Steve, and Karl? Like, what roles do they all play? Because do you still even listen back to those shows?
Yeah,
at all?
From time to time I do. Because either that or somebody will send me something where I'm being insulted or assaulted. And I thought it might be worth me seeing how I came out of that one. But I think, no, I do like it. I mean, the question, okay, somebody really famous in the BBC said to me once, I really like the Ricky Gervais show, Karl Pilkington and Steve Merchant. Really like it. But they said, there's something that bothers me. And I went, yeah, what's that? They go, well, it's called the Ricky Gervais show, but he hardly speaks.
Yeah, exactly.
All he does is laugh.
Yeah.
And I looked at them and I thought, you just haven't got it, have you? You haven't, because what you're missing is that's why it works.
Mm.
And what worked about it was that Karl fed in the feeding. Ricky and Stephen reacted, and Stephen became this kind of almost like adjudicator at points.
Yeah,
you know,
that's, I would say
able to sort of like bring them both together or keep them apart.
Yeah.
With whatever he did. They're both all of them, very talented people in the sense that they know how to keep the narrative alive.
Yeah.
And get to their point, right? But they didn't start that way, because the way it started is that Karl was just there to press the buttons, because Ricky made it very clear to me that I don't press any buttons. I ain't got time for that shit.
Yeah. Yeah, he said as much on air as well.
Absolutely, didn't want to press the buttons. He had time for that shit. So Karl was the solution to that, because he would be able to make sure the ads were played. Because if the ads don't get played, then the presenters don't get played. I remember Ricky also said to me when we were, putting the show together, and I think it's pre The Office going out actually. So he said something about there are conditions I'll do it, and one of them is I won't press the buttons. 2 was something about the fact that I pick all my own music. I said, that ain't happening.
Yeah.
He was totally unplaylisted, weren't they? They were an unplaylisted.
No, they had to play our music. They made out that they weren't, but they were. But I said it was much better if you had a one choice per show. It's more powerful. If I said to you, hey, thanks for joining me on my show today. In a moment, I'm going to play you my favorite song of the day. You're going to keep waiting to hear that song, right?
Well, Gary would just play Oasis, so it would be definitely maybe, every show.
Yeah.
See, that would be dreadful.
Well, I'm not on there.
No, they're lovely, Oasis. They're great. But the other condition, I think, was the fact that he only would do the show if Stephen Merchant was on it. And I said, well, who's Stephen Merchant?
Yeah.
I didn't even know who he was.
He wasn't famous yet.
Yeah, exactly.
And how did you feel about it?
I was also worried when I saw him whether he'd even fit in the studio.
But it worked unbelievably well, and that's why I think to this day people still there's a dedicated fan base for that show. It must feel nice that you put that together. You put Karl with Ricky, you allowed Steve on with Ricky. Perfect combination.
That's very kind of you. I think what I'd say about that, I mean, Karl and I worked on a few stations together pre that.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, different types of stations. We used to do production together.
All right.
But when I was programming stations, he would be like my right-hand guy, really. He was basically helping.
Your man at the back?
Yeah, no, he was man in the front. He wouldn't work. He was never man at the back. No,
Yeah.
he had a lot of attitude. He still does. And basically, he's very talented. I mean, like, the guy is a producer. That's the reason why his content works so well. He thinks it through. With content delivery, it's about how do you start and how do you end. Okay, it's you get those two angles. You've kind of got a concept. Then the middle bit, which is what happens, is also hard. But you must know how you start and you must know how you end. And if you think about that, if Ricky and Stephen had Karl coming into that, look at the genius of Karl.
Yeah,
able to play the character that they needed or wanted, but at the same time understand how the links would happen as well.
Yeah.
He was so talented, like the way he put together a show, even when he was like coming out of like his links were really tight and really strong, and his stories just fitted so well. Like he created a really nice arc when he did the show. It would all come full circle by the end of it. And one of our listeners said, how big a role did Karl play at XFM? It seems quite downplayed at the shows. But he was the head of production. Is that right? Or
yeah,
he was...
absolutely. No, he was very much so head of production, highly respected by many of the presenters and the management team. I spent many hours in that booth with him, production booth, because he liked to moan a lot, and I used to find that was a good way to.
I would love to hear that.
Keep him quiet, really. It was in a sound booth studio, really. After a while, I got it down pat. I could look like I was interested, but I was fucking asleep.
Yeah. That's a good.
No, he's very talented. I really think the man is incredibly talented, and I'm really glad for him that he's come through what was being a producer at a commercial radio station That's a hard job.
Yeah, I
That's a
bet.
hard job. And he did it really well. I mean, his imaging, some of the stuff he would do as imaging for the station, phenomenal, world class. I mean, he could have done that on any station, any major city in the world, and it would have been massive.
Wow.
Fantastic. Yeah, he was very
But as
talented.
someone who like started out, in hospital radio, I just think it's so great when you've learned the craft from that level and you work your way up. Like I don't think that happens like nowadays because obviously everyone can podcast and
that's a really good thought, because I think there was still a mystery about radio that helped the persona grow. Podcasting doesn't quite have the same magic about it because everybody's doing it now.
And there's a lack of immediacy. Like there is no one listening right now.
You're right. All the podcasts are predominantly pre-recorded, right?
Yeah.
And radio was live. And that will sort you out because it's all very well be able to press buttons and make times and go to the news and play ads but still be funny and also still sound like you're natural.
What a skill.
That is a skill.
Can I ask you a question more generally about like the XFM culture, like what the company culture was like? Because when I hear it, I just think, I just fucking love to work there. Like, it just sounds like it was just captured a moment in time. Obviously there's loads of exciting music, and I'm sure you've met loads of cool musicians, and you've probably been to some mad parties. And also, but no one seemed to take their job like too seriously. You hear the stories on the Ricky Gervais show, XFM shows, and there's jokes about Claire Sturgis being a smackhead, and like
no way. Claire's not a smackhead. She used to wear her slippers to work.
That's the new rock and roll, though, isn't it? Wearing your slippers to work.
Claire's lovely. I bumped into Claire the other day in Marks and Spencer's. We were both buying sausage rolls.
You bumped into a lot of people from XFM.
She met her husband, didn't she? The DJ. She met her DJ husband.
Oh, did she? I didn't know.
At XFM, yeah.
What was it like? What was like the standard day then in the XFM office? What was everyone like hungover or like?
Okay, I gotta be careful what I say here now. What do I say? How do I answer all of that? Because
everything.
No, there's things I want to say and things I can't say. Yeah. I guess really, basically, to be honest, actually, the place was fucking chaos.
It seemed it, but
fucking chaos. Because I tell you what, I remember the way I described it is that I used to say when we used to have meetings or chat about things in programming meetings or something, I used to say things like, who agrees or doesn't agree? Or what do you think? Should we or shouldn't we? And I actually said afterward, I said, you know what? None of the answers are wrong. Because in effect, for this to be truly an alternative radio station, we all are right.
Yeah.
It was quite open-minded, wasn't it? And you weren't scared to take risks. Like
no,
at least that's from an observer.
They weren't sort of unqualified risks. I mean, in a sense, we were managed by a very strong commercial company that wanted a return on its investment, and to some degree they never got it.
Really?
No, they never got it. I think they wanted. You got to understand. I mean, I remember when I hired Zoe Ball.
Wow, really?
Yeah, Zoe Ball did breakfast. Drive. Yeah. But the point is that I don't think Radar, which was the measuring tool for radio, was ever going to work for an XFM audience.
Yeah.
They don't have pencils.
No.
They don't sit down in a room and colour it half out.
No.
It just doesn't work like that. Mostly they're fucking high and they haven't got a clue what they're doing. So give them a pencil, I think it would just be chaos. So I don't think we ever got the audiences we deserved. And I think
it seemed like that. No.
Maybe you got the audiences, but it wasn't reflected in the radar, so you didn't get the advertising.
No, I was told once, a certain BBC station, very famous BBC station, that you could walk into their office at our peak and they were all listening to XFM.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me.
It's like a secret habit, isn't it? It's like a secret. No one dares to say anything. Yeah, even now, like it's got this cult audience now. I'm sure you're aware of it. Like exists on like YouTube threads and like Reddit threads and Facebook groups. People love these shows. That's kind of the reason we wanted to do this podcast and speak to you, because just to get that insight, because it's just so nice to hear.
Tim Lovejoy was another guy. Tim brought him in. He did mornings and
he's great.
He's talented. He's so talented. And he was great. He had a real passion for music, and some of the things he used to do, like I think he came up with that famous game he used to play called Indie Bin.
Okay,
So if you didn't like the song, did it go in the bin or in the indie bin? Get it?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
He's a good guy, and actually,
Yes,
I think he comes across better on radio than TV. He's not a bad TV presenter at all, but I like him on radio.
You would not know how many of the names, great names, that worked on XFM, but also are now massive on television, would say to me in those early days when we were doing radio, they'd say, I'm learning stuff here that I've never thought about in my life. And I've had more of a vibe doing a radio show than I've ever had doing TV.
Yeah, there's something about it. It's just...
Yeah, it's magic.
It's magic because, you're speaking to an audience live, like on TV, but the audience has to build up the picture in their own head of what's going on around you and things, whereas TV, you see it. There's more imagination, I think, in listening to radio, and that's why I think it's probably more special. And Mars and I both love radio as well, hence why we listen to the XFM shows, and a lot of people do, I think, as well.
Well, there's not too much out there now that is the same as, but in effect, it was a different time. And I've often thought that if social media was alive in the time of XFM, what would have happened to us?
Yeah.
Would it have made us good, or would it have made us absolute, arsehole wankers? What would it have done to us? I think what worked was because we were the underdog. That's why in time what we did has become more powerful. Yeah.
And what do you think about the station now? Because now it's not so much of an underdog; it's more mainstream. I think now. It probably is still. It's not completely mainstream, but it's more mainstream because of having larger audiences and things.
It hasn't a little bit because it's a self-styled alternative indie station. They often joked about it. Do you listen to Ellis and John?
No.
Oh, because they're really good. Now they've moved on to BBC 5 Live, but they were on Radio X. When they were sort of bringing back the comedy duo. They're so great. But I think Radio X is a much more self-aware station now as it was back then, because it seems like back then you probably weren't trying to do anything like edgy. It just was, and the time was right, and everything, the chemistry was there, and it was just an epicenter of talent.
Maybe it's a lot more simpler than that. Maybe it's the fact that everything was against us. Nobody really wanted an alternative radio station. No one really believed it could work. And they didn't know half the time what audience they were focusing on. So are we after men or are we after women? Are we after this age or that age? Do we want a wider audience? Let's play more Coldplay. It's like there was constant battles as to who are we going for, because we must be bigger. Because you see, in a commercial life, unless your audience is strong, you don't make any money. Okay? So this is the interesting way that the world has changed. Social media now allows you to build an amazing audience that's massive around the world. And if you get the right numbers, the social media pays you for that audience.
Yeah.
Because in effect, they want to use that audience to advertise with. So, but it's a different world, you see. And I think success today seems a lot more, this will sound bad, but it seems a lot more easier to find. I mean, I've worked with a couple of YouTube superstars. I've done a couple of things with them, and we've made the audience responses in the millions, which is incredible. Wow. Incredible. But they've put the work in, and they've got the relationship. They've been true to that personality, and they keep doing it, and their audience is loyal. And it's hard work though, but they do it. But they can make it work, if you sense. They design it to fit what the audience wants. What XFM was doing was, in the early days, was trying to be alternative when nobody wanted alternative.
Yeah. I think my only point was that now I think being alternative is far more fashionable and accepted than it was then. So has it lost? Do you think it's lost some of that underdog spirit that
Radio X now?
Yeah, Radio X now,
the owners. See, it comes down to the owners. The owners will have a view of it. What the owners want from that brand is money, and what they've got now with that brand is money. I mean, Chris Moyles was always going to bring an audience with him, and he did. It's slick now. They do their social media well. They have a brand that's working, and in the market, by and large, it holds a position of which it's trying really, hard to fulfill. I think It's not XFM though. And
No.
it's a news station called Radio X. In fact, when they buried XFM, they buried XFM.
Oh.
No, I'm glad they did.
Mm.
I'm glad they did because we retained what XFM was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that makes sense.
We can never ever say XFM doesn't sound like XFM. We could always say, yeah, I remember XFM.
God, I'd love to have been there. I would have loved to have been there.
Oh, I would have loved it. But even now, Radio X seems quite alternative, interesting, good, and it has a lot of the elements that XFM had, but it's not the same. And you're right, it's in a different time. It's in a different period because there was no social media and things like that. So
I want to talk about some of the people that you've met, like musician-wise, because I wanted to know.
Yeah, Bob Geldof.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you, and this was just for me, really. I want to know if you've met Bowie.
Yes, I have.
What was Bowie like?
Amazing. I met him with Zane Lowe, and I was very naughty. I knew I was going to meet him, so I got all my CDs. David Bowie.
You would,
put them in my back pocket, and I thought, well, what the hell? I mean, you don't know, right? So Zane and I fronted up. I think it was at HMV in Oxford Street, if I remember rightly. And Zane obviously met him, talked to him. He was going to introduce him to do a live set as well, but we were backstage, met him, and I was able to shake his hand.
Oh, wow.
And no, look, listen, I don't. There are many musicians that I adore, and you know, I can't show you. I mean, this is, you're looking at on Skype, obviously on podcast, I can't see, but this is my cabin. It's got 2 rooms, and they're both full of music stuff that I've collected over the years.
Wow.
Memorabilia and stuff like that. Anyway, I shook David's hand, and he was more than what I thought he would be. He was so beautiful. It's hard to explain. He was like, you knew he was talented. You knew he was an artist, but you didn't know how cool he was. He was so cool. He was like, he just was perfect. You know, like he was everything I wanted him to be and more.
Yeah.
And he was so generous with his time, and he looked at me. He signed all those CD covers for me, bro.
Oh, wow. What a guy. He gives off just this, it's just this ephemera. It's just this atmosphere. I don't even just start watching him on his videos. That my mum's.
I'll tell you what I reckon it is. Having met a lot of them. The greatest artists have one ability that makes them amazing, which is that when they focus on the person in front of them, they make that person everything. That's what he did.
Yeah.
That's what he did. But he was also able to do that to a concert audience.
Because often with stars, you know, and heroes, you hear stories that are the opposite of that.
Yes, predominantly. In fact, earlier when you were talking about the personas of presenters and so on and what they were like and comedians, and one of the things I noticed when we started to talk to a lot of big names is that you get them to come in, and we were all really excited. We'd be going like, great, we're going to see this guy, this comedian. Can't wait, bring him in, boom. Day comes, we're so excited. They walk into the building, he or she walk into the building, and they're as boring as batshit.
Oh, I can't.
No, wait. I'm going to explain something to you. Something I've learned. Okay, something I've learned. And so you go, oh, that's a shame. And you try to be nice, and they're just like, they're hardly saying anything. Occasionally you get the head knock, or you might get a handshake, something like that. You take them into the studio. You introduce them to the presenter. Still, they say nothing. Quiet. And the presenter's like, well, what the hell's going on here then? I thought you were...
I'd freak out.
Funny, thought you... Wait for it. You explain what you're going to do. Yep, that's what we're going to do, fine. Usually they're there because they're promoting a tour, a book, or something that they're about to do. And what will happen is the presenter will say, okay, we're going to go live after this song. I'll introduce it like this. Boom. Here we go. You get to that moment, they ask the question to the presenter, that persona comes alive. And that character comes into being. And on the mic, to the presenter, it's happening. End of the question, they go back into the boring. Now, think about this. What I learned was this. I learned that, let's say you're Coldplay, right? You've got to do the same songs everywhere.
Yeah.
You've got to be asked the same question over and over again. So as a persona, you've got to decide, I've got to protect myself here, because I cannot give everything every time.
You'd be exhausted, wouldn't you?
Exactly right. And in comedy sense, think about it in that. If you give all your jokes away every time you meet people,
Yeah.
what have you got in a routine? I mean, that's part of the reason why I think Ricky Gervais's comedies, they're basically well organized for himself, because he knows his material and he doesn't give it away. He's really good at natural reaction, so he does that in whatever. But he knows his shows are his shows.
Yeah. May I ask you, Andrew, do you watch like Ricky's work now, like post Office?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And because a lot of people, well, our audience are kind of split. Like, we've got a particular audience who are fascinated by Ricky, you know, from like the early 90s to, you know, 2004, 5, you know, that sort of period. But now there's another audience that has developed, you know, with Afterlife and Derek. Now, I'm not particularly on board with those things, but I was just wondering on, like, do you see a change yourself as someone who's worked with him and now that, and obviously someone who's in the public eye a lot and very active on Twitter and social media? I was just wondering, do you see a development in him and understand why people might perceive him to be different person now?
I think if you're a real fan of Ricky's work, I don't think you'd see that there's much difference in all of it. I think you would probably acknowledge that he almost is always the character that is, which is he sees the world in a certain way and he always brings that out.
Yeah.
He laughs at pain. He challenges everything that is supposed to be normal. And if you think about everything he's done, it's always that achieved in everything he's done.
Faithful to that. Yeah.
He's been very faithful to that. I think he's got really good at social media. That's what surprised me. I think when he realized the power of going live, you mean imagine if Ricky, Stephen and Cole were a YouTube channel now.
Yeah.
Imagine.
Quite big.
Yeah.
Quite...
Well, they were pioneers, weren't they, with the podcast?
They wouldn't do it because they're all fucking ugly, and they know that. But radio is good.
Well, Ricky's in pretty good shape now. He wasn't back then.
Well, he goes in and out of shape, doesn't he? I think.
Even Steve's in better shape now, but.
Well, look at him and look what Steve. I mean, can you imagine that Steve is even responsible for lip sync? That's his idea.
Is he? Wow.
Yeah, he owns that lip sync. But he's done a lot of other things as well. But you know, like all of it is like as a talent, you're always pushing yourself. You know how when an artist comes out with a great first album, and everyone's like, oh, it's brilliant, it's a great piece of work, and they call it the second album syndrome, which is it always fails. Because you see, I think your best work comes about from when you're at your most pressure or under circumstances that
totally
forced it.
agree with you.
Get it?
Okay.
Totally agree with you.
I think what you should be saying is Ricky is a great talent because he's now transcend for a couple of decades now. And, you know, that in itself shows that he has found a niche. And that niche keeps growing. I quite like Afterlife. I think it's really, really good because I think there's more in Afterlife than you get from the first viewing. And I actually know it was filmed not far around from where I live. I actually know where that church is and where they sat there and so on. But I think you rewatch those programs, you'll get something else out of it.
Yeah, I probably should return back to it.
There's going to be a third version, a third in the series, I mean.
Well, he's done very well, and I saw an interview with him where he's at this huge London mansion, and he said, "This is Netflix money. This is the Netflix money. It's bought me this house." So he's done very, very well with them.
Oh, very, very well. I mean, he's doing things that I don't think. I mean, there is a famous story about him, and I hope I'm not going to be in trouble for saying it. I'll be very clever. So, okay, effectively, there's a story that he was once offered a stack of money, and I'm talking a stack of money. Mm-hmm. To do a certain ad for an American company. Mm-hmm. And they made it very clear, we want him, and this is how much we're prepared to pay. And, you know, there's some good zeros on that. Mm. And the story goes that Ricky said no. First time, just no. And the manager's like, you don't want to think about it? No. What? No? The manager goes, fair enough. So you want me to go back and say no? Yep. Go back and say no. So he goes back, says no to the American company. And do you know what the American company said?
Double it.
Well done, mate.
Oh, really?
We knew that. So it's double.
Oh, wow.
So now there's a tricky position because the manager's got to come back and say it's double. Now, if I was a manager, I'd be thinking 20%.
Yeah.
I'd be thinking, or 2%, whatever he's negotiating. I'd be thinking like, you got to say yes, man. You got to say yes. So he goes, mate, checked, and they've come back and it's double the offer. And Ricky's answer is definitely no.
Yeah. I do respect that.
Cheeky little.
Because he's now earned far more money than that advert would have paid him, but he's done it in the way that it was true to his values.
If you don't know your value, you'll never get there.
Yeah, I respect that in him. Any more juicy stuff?
No.
Like,
and that one I just made up, so it's not even true.
I've got some, Andrew. I've got some listener questions for you.
Yeah, there's some listener questions, Andrew, that because we went out saying that you were on the show. We got inundated with questions, but we're just going to pick out a couple now for you.
And a lot of them were so specific to like
the show, yeah.
Which you're obviously not going to remember. I mean, yeah, who would? How often did you get complaints about the Ricky Gervais show? we know they only had one upheld, but I feel like they probably got a bunch every week from Ricky swearing and the stuff about freaks, Chinese people, and gay people.
Yeah. So, and the next question is?
It's funny because the next question is also about that. It says, if the radio show ran today, how long do you think it would take to be flooded with complaints and as a result be forced to change or be taken off air?
Oh, but okay. So here's the interesting thing about the second question. The second question is this. I actually think if they did what they did then now, it'd be tame compared to what's done on social media now. And if you think about podcasting has no particular rules, so you can do anything. So, you know, people are doing some really weird shit now on podcasting and streaming and YouTube to try and get your attention. It's like I've talked with some of these people and I go, "What are you going to do next? Kill yourself? Because then you won't have another show." It's like, what are you trying to do? So I think it's different. Again, we're at a different time. If I go back, was there a lot of complaints? Were people disinterested? Most people didn't get it, but the audience that understood it and understood XFM
really understood it.
And why is it that other stations wanted them?
Did you get offers from? Did other people offer?
It doesn't work like that, mate. If you run a radio station and you don't get an offer, can I have? People try and take it without telling you, and then you find out the other way. So I think it's very much about the loyalty. I think to a degree, I think if you think about the context of what I said about wanting to be able to say the F word and not be told when to do it, no radio station could give you that right. And I think that's why the natural world became the podcasting world. And they started it really. They were the champions. They basically proved you could go down a road, do it in a certain way and get followers and also get people to even pay for it.
It's like XFM seems like it was almost a social media. It was sort of social media before social media actually happened. Like it was kind of very, very. It was the sort of things you would share on social media now that wouldn't come out.
But do you remember the great show on XFM? It was called The Hijack.
No.
Oh, The Hijack. Do some research into The Hijack. The Hijack was a concept we had where we had to fill in. I think it was about an hour of programming, and we didn't know what to fill it with. And I think it was Cole's idea that why don't we call it The Hijack? Well, what does that mean, Cole? Well, what it means is that anybody, any celebrity, whether it be a musician, an actor, or whatever, comedian, they can come in and they hijack the station for an hour.
That's a good idea.
And they play their own music. Now, we had everybody on that. We had the who's who of entertainment want to do a hijack. Could you imagine today on radio starting a show called The Hijack?
No, they'd be too scared, wouldn't they, about like what they'd say, what they do, what they play, you know. Do you ever feel like nostalgic for that time in your life, or just that time generally in culture? Because I don't know, as someone...
definitely nostalgia, nostalgia. Yeah, definitely. And I think that, to be able to look back on your life, if you're in content or in entertainment, if you're able to look back at some point and get a little tear in the back of your eye, you might have done something okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's sweet. That's very sweet, and
Oh.
I can imagine it was. You must feel incredibly proud to have been involved in so many people's careers.
No, I am, but I'm not allowed to be, and I don't think a lot of people give a shit about
I'm
whether
sure
I do
they
or
do.
not.
We do.
Well, the problem is we were a little bit like we started it, and then everybody took off and went everywhere. You know, they've done
Yeah.
their own stories and gone around the world
Flew
1,000
the
times.
nest.
So yeah, they flew the nest. Everybody grew up, and they've. I guess what I've got to be proud of is that everybody took a bit of that XFM with them everywhere they went.
And that was Andrew Phillips. I think I said before the show, the man, the myth, the legend. Well, he was a very interesting character, wasn't he? Like
Gary, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that so much. I could have talked to him and maybe had a pint and talked for at least another 3 or 4 hours, because he was such an interesting guy. Because we did want to talk about the XFM shows, but we ended up talking about, radio in general and his life, and the sort of characters he's met and musicians
Comedy in general as well. He talked a lot about comedy specifically, and it's just so interesting to talk to a man who has launched many people's careers. And I'm not saying all those people wouldn't have had a career without Andrew Phillips, but he certainly played an important role in a lot of people's careers. And it was a kind of, it felt, I didn't want to say this because it sounds like sucking up. I didn't say it to him, but it really was a privilege to speak to him.
Yeah, I agree. I'm kind of a bit. I've got relaxed now. I've gone a bit of a high.
No, yeah, we were. It's no lie to say we were both anxious before the show, and we were very anxious. But anyway, he said that I think as soon as it started, I felt relaxed. But he said off air that he would come on again. So maybe he'll come and tell some of those stories that he didn't tell this time to make the contract. But yeah, a great guy, very interesting, and yeah, he was kind of in this. He described it before we started recording like a Swedish cabin, and it was quite. You couldn't really see it as blurred, but he had a lot of record discs and things around him, and yeah, I'd love to have had his life. I'm jealous.
So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed that chat, everyone. Do tweet us at Trout_DE. Gary set that up. I'm not to blame.
I don't know what I was thinking.
or you can Instagram me at Duchess_Pennell. As Gary said at the start of the show, we'll be recording a Dutch or Otherwise show, which will go out next Friday. And that's basically an opportunity for Gary and I to discuss, whatever we want to discuss.
General chat. Yeah, we I mean, it's not that we don't plan D-Trout spinners that down to a lot of detail, but we certainly don't plan. If you want to hear us unplanned, Badil and Skinner unscripted, Forrestal and Purnell unscripted, then that's Dutch or Otherwise. So, and then of course, as I say, we will be back to D-Trout spinners, the XFM show, as they go into January 2003. A very, very interesting set of shows. So please join us for that, and let us know what you thought of the interview. Let us know what you thought of Andrew, what you thought of our interviewing styles, because we're learning as well. So yeah, any feedback is great. And yeah, next Friday we'll see you again with a Dutch or Otherwise.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. I've been Miles Pennell, with me Gary Forrestal across the way in where there he is. All right.
I do.
Everyone.
Brighton.
Yeah. Take care, everyone. Look after yourself and
safe.
each other. All right. Ciao.
See ya.